Hello and welcome to Business Standards Morning Show. I am Ruchika Chitravanshi and let us take a look at the stories for today. Reserve Bank of India Governor Shaktikanta Das has reasserted his tough stance on cryptocurrencies and claimed that they pose a threat to the financial stability of the country. Das also said that the central bank has conveyed its reservations on virtual currencies to the union government, which he said is actively looking into it. The RBI had in 2018 banned the trade in cryptocurrencies, but the move was shot down by the Supreme Court in March last year. So, amid the growing interest in the virtual currencies, why the central bank is maintaining a tough stance on it, we find out in this report.
At a summit organized by the Business Standard, RBI Governor Shaktikanta Das expressed doubt over the credibility of reports claiming huge public interest in cryptocurrencies. Das said it looked like a marketing ploy to attract more people into that system. He was referring to a recent report of a research firm which claimed that at least 7.9% Indians have invested $10 billion in virtual currencies. Trade in cryptocurrencies is unregulated in India. The government is consulting various stakeholders, including the RBI, to finalize the contours of a bill on it. RBI's internal panel report on cryptocurrencies is also expected in a few days. So, let us examine what the RBI and the government are thinking about it. The Reserve Bank of India's stand on virtual currencies has been clear since the very beginning. It always looked at it with suspicion and considered it as a threat to the country's macroeconomic and financial stability. On Wednesday, the RBI governor reiterated his strong views against cryptocurrencies, saying that they are a cause for serious concern. At the Business Standard BFSI Summit, this is what the RBI governor told to consulting editor Tamal Bandyopadhyay.
Almost coming to the close. I know I'm taking a lot of your time.
No, it's okay.
But let's just to get a feel, touch and feel of the big elephant in the room in Indian context is the crypto. There was an interministerial committee where Reserve Bank of India has its representative, other regulators were there, and it was against the cryptocurrency. And I think the budget session, the government, the parliament, it is supposed to be taken up by parliament, but it's never happened. Meanwhile, crypto is going. You see, you pick up in a newspaper, you will find the crypto ads. You watch television channels, you find crypto ads. I know people who stay away from investing in stock market, but they have on their mobile crypto app and they're putting in money. So what's happening, sir? I know you have time and again, you have made your stance clear, but as a regulator, banking regulator, I would like to hear from you because it could be a threat to the financial system. That's what people are saying. And I'm particularly asking you because government listens to you. You have been asking for excise duty cut on petrol and diesel. That happened. So what's going to happen to the cryptocurrency?
You see, on crypto, let me reiterate that cryptocurrencies, in whatever name you call it, cryptocurrencies are a very serious concern so far as the RBI is concerned, and we have a serious concern from the point of view of macroeconomic and financial stability. How the issue has to be dealt with, we have given our detailed suggestions to the government. As far as I know, the matter is under active consideration of the government, and the government will decide. And you mentioned about the crypto numbers, how they are growing. Yes, in terms of volume, in terms of the amount that is invested, the numbers are definitely growing. And anecdotally, we hear so many things.
10 crore investors, 6 trillion investment.
But the number of investors, the sense I have, is that I'm not so sure about the numbers which are being quoted. Okay. Because whatever information we have, and I don't claim that I have 100% information, because since it's an unregulated territory, we don't get full information. But whatever information and feedback that we have, so with a reasonable amount of confidence, I think the number of participants in the crypto market seems, what is claimed seems somewhat exaggerated. And another interesting thing is about bulk of the investors, about should I say about 70% or even more of the participants in the crypto market have invested just about 1,000 rupees, 2,000 rupees, 3,000 rupees. So perhaps there is an effort to enroll as many people as investors as possible.
So more hype.
So I'm not saying that.
Okay.
I'm just telling the facts. I mean, people are doing certain activity. As the central bank, we have serious concerns from the macroeconomic and financial stability point of view. We have flagged these concerns. We have also given certain recommendations and suggestions to the government. It is under active consideration of
But
the
Governor,
government.
if government decides to regulate it and ask you to be the regulator, RBI, you have to do this, right? I mean, RBI will
No,
have
but why speculate?
Okay.
Why speculate? Let the government decide
Okay.
first. No?
Okay, sir. We have come to the end.
The government is reportedly considering a middle path on cryptocurrencies. A government source recently told a Financial Daily that while the hardline stance of banning cryptocurrencies outright was not considered feasible due to the large investments made in such instruments by Indians, these virtual currencies were also unlikely to be allowed as a legal tender. Meanwhile, the government is again examining a proposal to tax the ecosystem, which includes cryptocurrencies and NFTs. In fact, the tax department wants the framework for taxing the use of blockchain for commercial purposes to be implemented even before legislation on cryptocurrencies is brought in. Meanwhile, the tribe of crypto traders is growing in India, and all the stakeholders are looking towards the government to arrive at a consensus on the regulation of these virtual assets. According to some reports, the government is planning to table the bill in the budget session of Parliament next year.
Nykaa's founder and CEO, Falguni Nayar, has been in the news for all the good reasons lately. From leading several IPOs as an investment banker to launching one herself at the age of 59, Nayar has broken all templates set for a founder. Our next report takes a look at her journey as she became one of India's most successful entrepreneurs by creating the country's first woman-led unicorn.
Falguni Nayar has donned several hats in her 3.5-decade career. Born and raised in a Gujarati family in Mumbai, she began her career as a management consultant with A.F. Ferguson & Co. in 1985 after graduating from IIM Ahmedabad. She then went on to work at Kotak Mahindra Group in various roles for 19 years before deciding to start her entrepreneurial adventure, risking her family funds. She had set up Kotak's international operations in New York and London. When she left Kotak in 2012, she was the managing director of its institutional equities and investment banking divisions. To address the beauty needs of women, she started Nykaa the same year with no prior experience in retail, beauty, or technology. She was just a few months shy of turning 50 then. Her first and the only tweet, which has now become iconic, came on October 29, 2012, a day before Nykaa's website went live. 9 years later, today she is India's richest self-made woman with a net worth of $7 billion. Falguni Nayar and her family still own a 56.5% stake after the company's listing. With a market capitalization of $14 billion, Nykaa has comfortably broken into the club of India's top 100 most valuable companies. At the 52nd spot, it is ahead of the likes of Godrej Consumer, Bharat Petroleum, and Indigo. Building on her experience as a banker, Nayar has created a capital-efficient and asset-light business model. Before its $720 million IPO, Nykaa had raised only $100 million in equity. It also stands as an outlier in the startup space as a profitable company. In FY21, it posted a profit of $8 million on a revenue of nearly $330 million. Startups that have recently gone public or are in the process of doing so, such as Zomato, Policybazaar, MobiKwik, Paytm, Oyo Rooms and PharmEasy, are all loss-making. As much as we celebrate Nykaa's listing, the ecosystem is not easy on women founders. We spoke with Sairi Chahal, the founder and CEO of women-only social network Sheroes, and MobiKwik co-founder Upasana Thakur to understand the challenges that female founders face.
Look, we all know this is a super exception. This is a super exception in this ecosystem. It's a massive uh, rarity to have women build large companies. But I think a lot of this is that none of us expected to see this. You know, a lot of us haven't seen this happen in our lifetimes. If you're a woman who's starting late, then you're kind of written off. You really don't have a chance. And I think look at data. I think all data points to 22-year-old men from IITs hanging out with their tech bros. So I think that's the startup world we all know of, right? So you see very few successful women founders. You see very few women VCs. So you're typically the lone voice in the room, you know. So it's and building a startup needs a lot of cheerleading. And I think when you're a woman founder building late, when you're a woman founder building late a company for women, oh my God, that's like all things that don't add up, right? You don't even tick a single box there. So yeah, look, fundraising is hard for women. Look at data, women get less than 5% of the entire funding raised. I mean, for the longest time, somebody like me didn't apply to YC because they asked, I had a small child, how do you sort of do this, have a small child and, attend YC for 3 months, and until everything went online. I mean, we can count the list of women founders who are going to take their company's IPO, in next few quarters. And this work didn't start yesterday. It's been in the making last decade, right? Even the way a lot of startup stuff is organized, it's not built for women who have children and have homes to run. It's built for people who can sleep on the floor in the office and live in a flat. And it's very frat, it's not built for any of us.
I don't think age and gender has anything to do with founding a startup and being successful at scaling one. However, it's not every day that you see, a women-led internet startup in India getting listed. It's an exception that we would all like to or want to celebrate. I think it is going to create a huge deal of inspiration for millions and millions of young women who are thinking about entrepreneurship. 10 years ago when I was getting started, I mean, I have personally faced, and so have several other women that I know in the last several years, instances of reluctance, skepticism, cynicism, even discrimination, if you will. So it is not easy. And we are still breaking several ceilings. Age is a number. It's a question of our mindset. I've seen people who are very lazy even in their 20s and 30s, and there are people who are extremely agile in their late 60s as well. And we have seen previously other companies also get founded. Like last year we saw Happiest Mind get listed, and it is also run by a fairly experienced person. And so I don't believe that this myth also holds any factual reality to it.
Venture capitalist Vani Kola, the founder and MD of Kalari Capital, spoke on the impact Nykaa's IPO will have.
What a big moment the Nykaa IPO is for all of us. I personally feel excited and invigorated. In the IPO address, Falguni mentioned this, that she was skeptical about herself, starting when she was 50, which seems for most young entrepreneurs ancient. And I'm in my 50s, so I totally relate to what she's saying. 9 years later, she has busted every myth. Doesn't matter whether it's your second career, whether you're late in your life. It's all about, not giving in to the naysayers, but having sort of the courage to go after your passion. And I think what Falguni does, not just for women founders, because she busts more than one myth, and is to provide that inspiration, hope, and awareness. It is true that there is unconscious biases that exist societally, and they seep into many aspects, including, I think, women founders receiving less funding than their male counterparts. May the tribe, regardless of age, too young, too old, regardless of gender, regardless of background, pedigree. I think the tribe will continue to grow, and many entrepreneurs will emerge from various walks of life.
It's clear that Falguni Nair has set an example by breaking more than one stereotype. In that spirit, Nykaa's IPO was the best example of India's startup ecosystem being democratized.
September quarter results were a mixed bag for India Inc. While the combined net profit of consumer goods companies declined, profits for financials and commodity producers rose sharply. The companies, however, saw their operating profits and margins declining due to increased commodity prices. And the road ahead may not be different for India Inc.
September quarter results are drawing to a close with only a handful of companies left to reveal their report cards. The combined net profits of 42 Nifty 50 companies that have declared their results so far went up by 19.2% year-on-year and reached a record high of 1.12 trillion rupees in Q2 FY22. In comparison, the combined net sales of these companies were up 26.5% year-on-year, while their combined operating profits were up 11.2%. However, slow growth in operating profits compared to revenues indicates a decline in operating margins, and this has worried analysts. Before we get into that, let's go to Joseph Thomas, Head of Research at MK Wealth Management Services, to see how he assesses Q2 earnings.
Season is not over as yet. We may have a few more days of earnings updates, but overall it looks satisfactory. It also reflects the fact that economic recovery is on. Sales growth for Sensex had fallen by about 5% in Q2 of FY21, but Q2 of FY22 shows that it has risen by about 22%. Sales growth for Nifty had fallen by about 7.5% in Q2 of FY21, but it has now risen by about 34%. So sales growth has moved on expected lines, but EBITDA margins have come down in sharp contrast to what we had seen in Q1 and Q2 of FY20. Currently, we have a scenario where sales growth is improving, while there is margin contraction. But what is more important in this context is to see whether sales growth is accelerating further on the back of the strength of the economic recovery, and whether that translates into better pricing power in the hands of the corporates is something that we need to see.
As pointed out by Thomas, this earnings season was a hit on EBITDA margins, which was likely because of India Inc.'s inability to pass on increased input costs. Going forward, experts expect margin contraction to continue over the next few quarters as commodity inflation results in wage inflation.
And when we say inflation, we generally focus on commodity inflation, raw material inflation. There is a second wave of inflation which could emerge from this commodity inflation, that's the wage inflation. That may have a much longer impact on corporate earnings. As of now, corporates are facing some kind of labor shortages, and also their capex cycle is gradually picking up. These two factors coming in, and the wage inflation could gradually start picking up. That may have an adverse impact on earnings. Second is that as far as the rate of economic growth goes, it is likely to become stable to higher as we move on to the next few quarters. If growth becomes more intense, the pace of recovery becomes more intense, the pricing power of corporates will also improve.
Amit Gupta, who is a fund manager PMS at ICICI Securities, too believes consumer-related companies will continue to face headwinds as commodity-related inflation will remain sticky in the near future.
In quarter two, we have seen that the company's margins because of this higher commodity prices has been hit. So the commodity user companies, I think going forward, there is some challenge because of this for them, because commodity inflation is here to stay. I think even in the coming quarters, I think if you see the aluminum or steel prices, so somewhat the prices are not expected to come down sharply. There may be consolidation possibly at the elevated levels, which is possible in these commodities. So companies, they have to adopt, they have to go for more cost optimization in order to come out better going forward.
That said, all is not that bad for India Inc. Despite margin hit, the street has lauded companies that have managed to increase their market share.
Clearly happening despite the margins are hit. For example, take the case of Asian Paints. Asian Paints margins, gross margins declined by 10%, but their market share actually has been increasing continuously. So they are if you see the last whole year, financial year 21, and now these quarters, we have seen they have increased the share not only from the organized but also from the unorganized space. Similarly, from the fast moving electrical goods, we have seen some good results. Havells, for example, continuously on quarter basis, they have posted good numbers, and despite they have increased the prices in cables or in fans and all, their market share also has increased. So this is something that market is looking at, that this formalization of the economy, where the lower the spectrum companies are finding little tough, the business is flowing into the relatively better components of the sector where the market share is increasing now.
Against this backdrop, what is the earnings outlook for the second half of the current fiscal year?
Expectations for H2 of FY22 looks constructive, robust and positive. This is mainly the fact that economic growth is happening, and economic growth is quite broad-based. Last few years there has been an accent on avoiding mainly capex plays and also leveraged companies. But as of today, the leveraging has come down and companies are now in a position to borrow more and spend, and also the banking system is also in a position to lend more, with having got a fix on their asset quality issues. We expect both B2C and B2B segments to do very well. And after a gap of many years, it's expected that the government capex is going to be overtaken by private capex. We expect the near-term earnings to remain very good, and the medium-term outlook also looks quite.
For Amit Gupta, value-linked sectors like banks and capital goods are likely to do well, and he expects overall earnings to grow at a CAGR of 25% till FY24. On Friday, companies like Burger King, Deepak Fertilizers, Grasim Industries, Hindalco Industries and ONGC will declare their September quarter results. That apart, investors will also track industrial production data for September and retail inflation data for October, due to be released later today. Moreover, shares of Fino Payments Bank will also debut on the bourses today. Globally, inflation concerns, bond yield movement and oil price trajectory will guide the sentiment.
Unlike the cash market, where the shares are purchased and sold daily, futures and options are derivative contracts which allow a market participant to purchase and sell a stock or index at a specific price and on a future date. These leveraged products claim to offer some cushion to the investors against future fluctuations in the stock market. Let us find out more about them.
Unlike the cash market, where the shares are purchased and sold daily, futures and options are derivative contracts which allow a market participant to purchase and sell a stock or index at a specific price and on a future date. These leveraged products claim to offer some cushion to the investors against future fluctuations in the stock market. All contracts have an expiry date. Each contract represents an underlying stock or index in the spot market. The future price moves in tandem with the underlying asset. Contracts are traded in a fixed lot size and multiples thereof. Index future contracts are available in monthly series, while index options are available on weekly and monthly expiry. Stock F&O are available only up to 3-month future expiry dates, whereas one can trade in index contracts up to 5-year future expiry dates. Due to the strong element of speculation, the F&O segment usually sees hedgers or speculators trading in it. The maximum duration for a futures contract is 3 months. Now, let us understand the basic difference between futures and options. A future contract requires a buyer to purchase shares and a seller to sell shares on a specified future date, unless the position is closed prior to contract expiry date. While an option contract gives the buyer and seller the right but not the obligation to buy and sell shares at a specific price anytime till the contract is in effect. So, if needed, you can opt out of your options any given time, but that wouldn't be possible in case of futures, where the trade must take place at the specified date. Options have 2 categories, and if you are bearish on a stock or index and expect the price to fall, you can choose puts option. Although futures and options are said to be high-risk trading instruments given the higher capital requirement in terms of minimum quantity to trade, yet these are seen as a go-to product by traders and speculators due to ample liquidity, mainly in the index contracts such as Nifty and Bank Nifty. The trading volume in the F&O segment is considerably higher compared to the cash segment.
That's all we have for you today. We will be back with more news and analysis. Stay tuned. Thank you for watching.
If you like this video, share it and subscribe to Business Standard. For more news, views and insights, log on to www.business-standard.com. Do also follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.